I'm Samuel Carter, and at 72 I've seen enough of this world to know when it's trying to break you. The Oak Ridge Saturday market was alive that morning, a chaotic swirl of color and noise that reminded me of the old supply depots in Nam, minus the gunfire, thank God. The air smelled of fresh peaches, grilled sausage, and that faint tang of dust kicked up by 100 boots on the gravel lot. Stalls lined the square, piled high with tomatoes, handmade quilts, and jars of honey that caught the sunlight like amber. Folks haggled, kids darted through the crowd, and vendors shouted their deals like drill sergeants barking orders. I loved it here, always had. It felt like a slice of the America I fought for. I was wearing my old olive green jacket, the one I wore through the jungles of Vietnam. It's faded now, the sergeant's patch barely visible, the cuffs frayed from years of wear. But it's mine, a second skin that's seen me through hell and back. I wasn't here to make a statement, just to grab some apples from my neighbor, Mrs. Ellis, who's been stuck at home with a bad hip. As I shuffled toward a fruit stall, my bad knee aching from the cold, I spotted a little girl, couldn't have been more than 10, struggling with a crate of carrots bigger than she was. Her mom, busy with a customer, didn't see her wobbling under the weight. I've been there, kid, I thought, remembering the packs I hauled through monsoon mud. Hey, sweetheart, I called, my voice rough but gentle. Let me help. I took the crate from her, setting it down by her mom's stall. Her eyes lit up, big and brown like a doe's, and she mumbled a shy, "Thank you." I dug into my pocket, found a couple of crumpled dollar bills, my coffee money for the week, and pressed them into her hand. "Get yourself a candy or something," I said, winking. She grinned, clutching the bills like they were gold, and ran off to a nearby sweet stall. Her mom gave me a grateful nod, and for a moment I felt like I still belonged in this world. That moment didn't last. At the fruit stall, a guy named Mitch, big, loud, with a face like he'd bitten into a sour lemon, stood behind a pile of apples that looked polished enough to be in a magazine. I picked one up, testing its weight, and asked, "How much for a half dozen?" My voice was steady, but I felt the eyes on me, the way folks sometimes stare at an old man in a worn-out jacket like he's a stray dog wandered into the wrong yard. Mitch sized me up, his lip curling. "What's with that rag you're wearing, old-timer?" he said, loud enough to draw glances from the crowd. "You look like you just rolled out of a gutter." A few people chuckled, and my stomach twisted. I've taken fire from enemy lines, watched buddies fall, but this, standing in my own town, mocked for the jacket that kept me alive, hit like a gut punch. "It's just an old jacket," I said, keeping my voice even, though my hands started to shake. "Kept me warm in tougher times than this." "Tougher times?" Mitch snorted, tossing an apple in the air like he was some hotshot. "What, you think you're some kind of war hero? That thing's a disgrace. Bet you picked it up at a thrift store to play pretend." The laughter from the crowd grew, sharp and cruel like shrapnel tearing through me. I felt my face burn, the weight of every eye on me. I wanted to tell them about the nights in the jungle, the screams, the blood, the friends I buried, but my throat locked up. All I could do was adjust my jacket, the fabric catching on my calloused fingers, and mutter, "Just give me the apples." Mitch wasn't having it. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're scaring off my customers looking like that. Get lost or I'll make you." He grabbed the sleeve of my jacket, yanking it hard enough to rip the seam a little. I stumbled, catching myself on a crate, the apples rolling onto the ground. The crowd went quiet, a few gasps cutting through the air, but nobody stepped in. Not one soul. Mitch shoved me again, lighter this time, but it was enough to make my knee buckle. I straightened, my heart pounding, and walked away, the laughter trailing me like a shadow. I could feel the eyes on my back, the whispers, the pity. I'd faced worse than Mitch in my time, mortars, ambushes, betrayal. But this was different. This was my town, my people, and they'd turned me into a joke. My chest burned with anger, not just at Mitch, but at myself. Had I let myself become this? A broken old man invisible to the world I'd fought for? I wanted to march back, to make him see who I was, but doubt gnawed at me. What was the point? Who'd listen to an old vet in a tattered jacket? As I reached the edge of the market, I sat on a bench, my hands still trembling. The market's noise felt distant now, like a radio turned low. I traced the faded sergeant's patch, remembering the man I used to be. I wasn't done yet. I didn't know how, but I wasn't going to let this be the end of me. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it unfolded. I sat on that splintered bench at the edge of the Oak Ridge town square, my hands still trembling from Mitch's venom back at the market. The air felt heavier now, thick with the scent of blooming lilacs from a nearby garden, but it did nothing to calm the storm in my chest. The market's noise, vendors shouting, kids laughing, the clink of coins, felt like a distant war drum mocking me. My jacket, torn at the seam from Mitch's grip, hung like a weight on my shoulders, every frayed thread a reminder of the humiliation I'd just endured. I'd faced enemy fire in Vietnam, carried wounded men through hell, but this was a different kind of battle, and I wasn't sure I had the fight left in me. As I stared at the gravel, tracing the faded sergeant's patch on my sleeve, a voice broke through my haze. "Mr. Carter, you okay?" It was Clara, the young woman from the flower stall, her apron dusted with pollen and her brown eyes full of concern. She'd seen the whole thing with Mitch, and her voice carried the kind of empathy that made me think of my daughter, long grown and moved away. "That guy was way out of line," she said, sitting beside me, her hands twisting nervously. "You didn't deserve that, not one bit." I managed a nod, my throat too tight to speak. "Just wanted some apples," I finally muttered, my voice rough as sandpaper. "Didn't think I'd start a war over it." Clara's laugh was soft, but her eyes were fierce. "You're a hero, Mr. Carter. My dad was Navy. He'd have been furious to see someone treat you like that." Her words stirred something deep, a flicker of the pride I used to feel when my platoon called me Sarge. But pride was hard to hold on to when the whole market had laughed at me, when Mitch's words, "thrift store hero," still burned in my ears. I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at me. What was I now? Just an old man in a ragged jacket, invisible to a world that didn't care. Before I could answer, a group of teenagers sauntered by, their sneakers crunching on the gravel. One of them, a lanky kid with a baseball cap tilted sideways, pointed at me and snickered. "Yo, check out the hobo in the army costume," he called, loud enough to draw stares from a couple passing by with grocery bags. His buddies laughed, and one tossed a crumpled soda can that landed at my feet with a dull clatter. My fists clenched, the old soldier in me itching to stand, to show them what a real fight looked like. But I stayed put, my heart pounding, my discipline holding me back like a leash. Clara shot to her feet, her face red. "Back off, you little punks!" she shouted, stepping toward them. The kids just laughed harder, mimicking Mitch's taunts. "Hobo hero! Hobo hero!" they chanted, strutting off toward the market. I felt the anger boil over, hot and sharp. But it wasn't just at them. It was at myself for sitting here, for letting this town reduce me to a punchline. "I should have said something," I muttered, more to myself than Clara. "Should have told them what this jacket means." She put a hand on my shoulder, firm but kind. "You don't owe them an explanation," she said. "But we're not letting this slide." I didn't know what she meant, but her determination was like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of giving up. Back at the market, Mitch was still holding court, his voice booming over the stalls as he bragged to a cluster of vendors. "Put that old geezer in his place," he said, tossing another apple in the air like he was king of the hill. "Can't have bums like that scaring off customers." A few vendors chuckled, but others shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting away. Clara, now back at her flower stall, wasn't laughing. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. I didn't know it then, but she was posting a photo of Mitch shoving me, her caption simple but sharp. "This is how Oak Ridge treats its veterans?" She showed it to a few nearby vendors, her voice low but urgent. "Samuel's one of us," she said. "We can't let this stand. This..." The market buzzed on, but a shift was happening. A couple of vendors, an older guy selling honey and a woman with a bread stall, nodded at Clara, their faces grim. Others hesitated, glancing nervously at Mitch, who had sway with the market organizers. I didn't see any of this, still sitting on that bench, my mind replaying the incident like a bad film. The soda can at my feet seemed to mock me, a symbol of how low I'd fallen. I thought about the medals in my drawer at home, the ones I hadn't looked at in years. Did they mean anything anymore? Or was I just a relic, like this jacket worn out and forgotten? Clara's post was starting to spread online, comments piling up from locals, some angry, some dismissive. One guy wrote, "Mitch is a jerk, but that old man should dress better." Another said, "Veterans deserve respect, period." I was oblivious to it all, lost in my own head, wrestling with the urge to march back to that stall and confront Mitch. But what would that do? Start a fight? Get me thrown out for good? My hands traced the tear in my jacket, and I felt that spark of defiance again, small but stubborn. I'd survived worse than this. I wasn't done yet. The market's energy felt different now, like the air before a storm. Whispers moved through the stalls, and Clara's post was gaining traction, reaching beyond Oak Ridge. I didn't know it, but the ground was shifting under my feet, and the fight I thought I'd lost was just beginning. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay to see how I put them all in their place. The Oak Ridge market was a madhouse, vendors shouting over each other, the air thick with the smell of fresh bread and diesel from a delivery truck idling nearby. My heart was pounding as I stood at the market's entrance, my torn jacket hanging like a battle flag. I don't know what drove me to come back. Maybe it was the apples I never got for Mrs. Ellis. Maybe it was the fire in my gut telling me I wasn't done. My knee ached, my hands shook, but I squared my shoulders and stepped into the chaos. I'd faced worse than a loudmouth like Mitch in Vietnam. I wasn't about to let him chase me out of my own town. Mitch spotted me before I'd taken 10 steps. He was behind his fruit stall, arms crossed, his face twisted like he'd just smelled something rotten. "You again?" he bellowed, loud enough to make heads turn. "I told you, old man, you don't belong here in that rag." His words hit like a slap, and the crowd's murmurs grew, some laughing, others shifting uncomfortably. I felt the old anger flare, hot and sharp, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm just here for apples," I said, locking eyes with him. "You got a problem with that?" The crowd went quiet, waiting for his next move. Before Mitch could fire back, a low rumble cut through the market's noise. It was the sound of tires on gravel, heavy and deliberate, like a tank rolling into position. I turned, and so did everyone else, as a black SUV pulled up to the market's edge, its polished surface gleaming in the midday sun. The doors opened, and out stepped a man in a crisp military uniform, his chest covered in stars that caught the light like a beacon. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, whispers rippling through them. I didn't know who he was, but the way he carried himself, back straight, eyes sharp, reminded me of my old CO in Nam, the kind of man who could silence a room with a glance. He strode toward me, his boots crunching on the gravel, and stopped right in front of me. "Sergeant Samuel Carter?" he said, his voice calm but commanding, like he was addressing a parade ground. I blinked, stunned, and nodded. "Yes, sir," I managed, my voice catching. He extended a hand, his grip firm as iron. "General Marcus Reed," he said loud enough for the whole market to hear. "I saw what happened here thanks to a post online. No veteran gets treated like this on my watch." My chest tightened, a mix of shock and something I hadn't felt in years, pride. Mitch's face went white as a sheet, his bravado crumbling like cheap drywall. The general turned to the market manager, a nervous guy in a polo shirt who'd rushed over, sweating bullets. "This market's done disrespecting those who served," General Reed said, his voice like a gavel. "Shut it down, now," the manager stammered. "But sir, we—" The general's stare cut him off, cold and final. "Do it, or I'll have every veteran in this state breathing down your neck." The crowd gasped, and I swear I felt the ground shift under me. Within minutes, the market was chaos in reverse. Vendors were told to pack up, their tables folding with a clatter, crates of fruit and crafts hauled back to trucks. Customers were ushered out, some grumbling, others wide-eyed, whispering about the general. Mitch stood frozen at his stall, his apples untouched, his jaw slack. General Reed turned to him, his voice low but sharp as a bayonet. "You mocked a man who fought for this country," he said. "You think you're tough, humiliating a veteran? You're nothing." Mitch opened his mouth, but no words came out, his eyes darting to the crowd now staring at him like he was the one who didn't belong. Clara, the flower vendor who'd posted about the incident, pushed through the crowd, her face lit with a fierce grin. "Told you we wouldn't let this slide, Mr. Carter," she called, and a cheer went up from a handful of vendors, the honey guy, the bread lady, a few others who'd rallied behind her. Their voices hit me like a lifeline, pulling me out of the shame I'd been drowning in. I looked at the general, his face unreadable but his eyes steady, and felt tears prick mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. The medals in my drawer, the ones I'd hidden away, suddenly felt real again. Mitch finally found his voice, stepping toward me, his hands raised like he was surrendering. I didn't know you were the real deal," he mumbled, his face red with shame. "I thought you were just—" He trailed off, unable to finish. I looked at him, the anger still there but softer now like a fire burning low. It's not about the jacket, I said, my voice steady. It's about respect. You don't get to decide who's worthy of it. He nodded, his eyes on the ground, and I saw something shift in him. Maybe not redemption, but a crack in his arrogance. As the market cleared out, General Reed clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone, Sergeant," he said. "We're working with the town to make sure this never happens again." Clara and the other vendors gathered around, offering apologies, handshakes, even a bag of apples from the bread lady. The crowd's cheers followed me as I walked away, my jacket feeling lighter, like it carried the weight of my service again, not my shame. Days later, I heard the market reopened with new rules. No vendor could discriminate, or they were out. Mitch, of all people, started volunteering at the local Veterans Center. His head low, his attitude changed. I didn't need to gloat. Seeing him there was enough. I went home that night, pulled my medals out of the drawer and set them on the table. For the first time in years, I looked at them without flinching. I'd fought for this country once, and today, I'd fought for myself. And damn, it felt good to win.